The Democrats chose the most compromised, most complicit, most compliant, most corrupt, and most mentally absent candidate they could, with the intent of doing as much damage as they could in the allotted amount of time. Unfortunately for them, the American people didn't give them any more time. But I think that every single law, every single executive order, every single judicial nomination, every single pardon that was signed on behalf of Joe Biden with an Autopen needs to be fully examined, challenged by this Department of Justice, and maybe ultimately null and void, because this entire presidency and the Autopen is the biggest scandal in American history.
I agree.
Nothing's close.
Nothing's close. Watergate compels in comparison.
Want to really see something that said, take a look at what happened.
Hey.
Why this beat so cold?
We will make America proud again. And you try to kill we will make America wealthy again. And yes, together, we will make America great again.
Looks different. It looks authentic. In fact, if you look at the last name, it almost looks like the president was having a hard time spelling his last name there. Is this White House of the opinion that the only pardon that would count is one that the president signed himself?
It's very interesting. Very interesting props. If you want to bring them to my office later so I can take a closer look, I would like to do that. The president is making a good point when he discusses the usage of the Autopen. Who was running the country for the past 4 years? Perhaps those documents were signed with the Autopen, something that this, I believe the Department of Justice is looking into. As you saw, Ed Martin made an announcement at the Department of Justice this morning to launch an investigation because the American people deserve answers.
Is there any concern that this president, who won the election on a promise to fix the economy and close the border, that focusing and scrutinizing these Biden pardons is looking into the past instead of looking forward?
I think in comparison to the amount of time this president has spent on securing the border, on fixing our economy, I just read out for you an entire list of economic accomplishments. Look at the border numbers. Look at the time and effort he's divulged into solving the global conflicts abroad. It pales in comparison, but it still, nevertheless, is a very important issue. And it was a huge issue that sent the president back to this White House. The Americans saw with their own eyes a mentally incompetent president, and they want answers for that, and the president believes they should have
And
them.
something that just
Go
crossed
ahead.
Caroline, how mad do you think President Trump is going to be when he finds out that Elon Musk said, "I'm sorry, but I just can't stand it anymore. This massive, outrageous, pork-filled congressional spending bill is a disgusting abomination. Shame on those who voted for it. You know you did wrong. You know it."
Look, the president already knows where Elon Musk stood on this bill. It doesn't change the president's opinion. This is one big, beautiful bill, and he's sticking to it. Cameron.
Thank you.
Uh-oh, we have some breaking news. Ed Martin has been directed to look into the Biden Autopen pardons. How ironic. He is now in a position to get to the bottom of the Autopen. By them trying to bury him, they handed him the shovel to bury them. All those pardons must be rendered null and void. Man, oh man, oh man. Trump's new pardon attorney to scrutinize Biden's 11th hour pardons. Yeah, buddy, it is going down. It is going down, y'all. Sound asleep, it wasn't he? Didn't know who was running the country. Autopen.
Most complicit. The Democrats chose the most compromised, most complicit, most compliant, most corrupt, and most mentally absent candidate they could, with the intent of doing as much damage as they could in the allotted amount of time. Unfortunately for them, the American people didn't give them any more time. But I think that every single law, every single executive order, every single judicial nomination, every single pardon that was signed on behalf of Joe Biden with an Autopen needs to be fully examined, challenged by this Department of Justice, and maybe ultimately null and void, because this entire presidency and the Autopen is the biggest scandal in American history.
I agree.
Nothing's close.
Nothing's close. Watergate compels in comparison.
Nothing is close. The biggest scandal in American history. I also want to play this clip right here of old Scott of old Scott doing it on CNN once again for the people.
I agree. It's being done out in the open. It's being done in the light of day. We're not doing it at the 11th hour here or as we're on our way up to the Capitol to see the next president being sworn in. And I might add, I don't think there's any doubt who's actually signing these pardons. You know, at the end of Biden's term, we had thousands of people that were pardoned or offered some kind of clemency for drug offenses. I have my doubts about whether Joe Biden signed all of those. And there's obviously, because of the new books that are out, clear reporting here that there was something of a Politburo running the White House at the end of the Biden administration when many of the most controversial pardons were issued. So in this case, Donald Trump, I think, is fully owning all of these decisions. And I agree with Ellie in the Grimm case, if for no other reason than this paralysis that he suffered and the fact that he'd paid his debt, I think it's a defensible decision.
And in fact,
Well, what's going on, family? I hope everybody that is tuned in right now is blessed, well, and healthy. Hope y'all are having an amazing week, man. The world of politics. Something new every single day. It's getting crazier and crazier by the minute. And guess what? President Trump is our president. So we quite frankly don't know what to expect next. But we have turned this ship around and we are off in the right direction. You know, you might not like this. You might love this. You might not agree on everything. We might disagree on this. It's okay. You know, there's a lot going on right now. Huge investigations are going on. The DOJ, especially with the previous administration, Biden, these pardons, the Autopen scandal, the biggest scandal in American history, that left this country a complete mess. And now we're fighting, and you know, activist judges, you know, people think they outrank the president. They don't want him to clean up the mess. They want to block every move he makes. It's a disgrace, man. You know. But the fake news media won't ever tell anybody the truth. It's just Trump is the big bad orange man, the bad guy, and they want everything to burn and crash. So guess what? They can blame it on Trump or Elon Musk, you know. And they love what's going on with this bill, and they love the controversy it's causing right now. And Elon Musk is speaking out against it, and so much is going on in the world of politics, man. And they love that this is all taking place. So here we are. What do y'all think? Let me know in the comment section. How do you feel about what President Trump is doing right now? How do you feel about the big beautiful bill? A lot of things that President Trump has promised, promises made, promises kept. You know, hey, here we are. Here we are. Doing exactly what he campaigned on. Again, not everything is going to be, you know, roses and what they call it. Not everything is going to be picture perfect and beautiful in the world of politics. And not everybody is going to be happy. You know, got rhinos, people that should have been gone a long time ago. There needs to be term limits. You know, people have stayed too long. People are laughing and going to the bank, enriching themselves. The biggest scandals, frauds, criminals, people that ought to be walked out with their hands behind their back. Simple. But let's jump into this. Let's see what's going on.
Well, Fox News has learned that the Department of Justice is investigating the competency of former President Joe Biden, specifically when he issued pardons during the final days of his presidency, as well as the use of his Autopen in that endeavor. Now, Fox News has been told that the Justice Department pardon attorney, his name's Ed Martin, is reviewing a list of Biden-era pardons, and it is unclear what individual pardons are being reviewed by Martin's office. Here's what we do know. Back in December, Biden was criticized for commuting sentences for 37 of 40 federal inmates on death row. He also issued a preemptive pardon of his son, Hunter. Then in January, it was Inauguration Day, actually. Biden granted pardons to more members of his family, to General Mark Milley, to Dr. Anthony.
Mass murder. Day 6. You know, Throw the laptop out in the middle of the street. Crack cocaine. All on the dresser. You just can't make it up, man. But all of a sudden, Trump is the convicted felon. He's the big bad orange man. Let's raid Mar-a-Lago. Yeah.
Anthony Fauci, Liz Cheney, and several other January 6th committee members. Now, Professor Yu, Article 2, Section 2, Clause 1 gives the president the power to pardon. And even Ed Martin, who is allegedly conducting this investigation, has said that's a plenary presidential power.
You caused me to pull this baby out and take a look at some things.
Nice.
I hear
The Biden crime family.
it's free.
Yes, yes.
Look, I wouldn't trust these Biden aides with DocuSign. Don't even ever respond to a DocuSign from these guys, not to mention the Autopen. But what this reminds us is the president makes a lot of important constitutional decisions. The pardon power, signing legislation. The only place the Constitution requires him to actually sign it is a bill. So all these other decisions, appointing ambassadors, issuing pardons, what's important is not did he sign it, but did President Biden make a conscious decision? And did anyone record it? So I think that actually makes it worse for the Biden aides and makes it even more compelling that we should have an investigation. Because one thing we'd say is, can Biden name any of these cop killers? Can he name any of the child murderers that he granted pardons to? Does he remember any of their names? Did any aide actually write down the names when he made the decision? If they can't show that, then what worries me is that these aides seized presidential power, are committing forgery, committing abuse of power. They should either be prosecuted by the Justice Department, and more importantly, Congress should have hearings, should have its own special counsel to figure out, do we need to have a different body rather than the cabinet decide whether a president has become incompetent and needs to be replaced?
So as you noted, it's not so much the use of the Autopen, it's did he make a decision with specificity for which that Autopen was used? Quick question, though, on that congressional investigation. The subpoenas went out, or excuse me, the voluntary kind letters, I call them, went out May 22nd requesting interviews. It's been more than a week. It's been almost 2 weeks. There have not been subpoenas, and that's in House Oversight Committee. Is there a case to be made for having a special congressional committee? Because 1 year from this month, the January 6th committee had done 1,000 depositions and interviews. So far, we have done 0 in this Congress.
I didn't know that, but that shows you the kind of urgency you could get if you had a full congressional special committee like Watergate, like Iran-Contra, and like January 6th, with the power of subpoena. If people don't show up and do the interviews, if they lie to the committee, then the Justice Department can and should throw them in jail. And that will get people off their butts and showing up in Congress. And why should these Biden aides even need a subpoena? They should be out in public saying, I did not commit forgery. I did not take advantage of, as Robert Hur said, a well-meaning elderly man with a poor memory to abuse the power of the United States government. But they're not going to show up on their own, so they need to have a subpoena to force them.
Yeah, that makes sense. You know, Emily, I want to play for you. This is Ed Martin, who's doing the investigation. Here are his thoughts on the pardon power.
No one, I think, with the standard of sort of reasonableness, thinks that what Joe Biden did at the end of his term was particularly reasonable. Now, I happen to think the pardon power is plenary. If you use the Autopen for a pardon power, I don't think that that's necessarily a problem. But the question is, how did this happen? Just like, by the way, many people said, well, wait, there's 1,500 January 6 pardons. How did that happen? These are big moments, and so they have to be able to withstand scrutiny. And I do think that the Biden pardons need some scrutiny.
So he's well aware of the nuances of the law, and his investigation seems to be quite detailed.
Yeah, and look what he's saying, plenary, meaning absolute. But the point is that it's not without scrutiny, to your point. And I think what's so alarming, first of all, I note that the mainstream media, again, called this unfounded. But the reality is that it's not so simple as the Autopen use. The point is the consciousness. And it was the president himself, Biden, who said he had no idea about one of the policies about which an Autopen was alleged to have been used. At one point, we know that he was verified out of the country. And so the issue becomes essentially like, okay, fine, if you delegate, that's one thing. But if it was someone else usurping presidential and executive authority, well, then that's a whole host of other issues, and it is frightening. And I note that if a president has a call, for example, with a foreign leader or whatever, ever. What is it, 4 different versions? There's always a note taker. Everything is recorded. So for this plenary absolute power, for something that is so infinitely impactful with no room for the courts to intervene at all, then shouldn't there then be a record of that consciousness, of that thought process, right? For wills, we have to prove it up, down, and sideways. So why not for this absolute executive authority? Should we not rest assured that indeed it was the president and not his whole host of children that were around him and all of a sudden veering from all of his public comments about criminal justice, for example, up until then, although we know that he's a definite sort of cabal family man for sure.
And Kennedy, you know, this is why this matters. It's not so much, you know, the Liz Cheneys and Mark Milley's and the political part of this. It's this. This is why this matters to me. Look at this. Louisiana child killer spared by Biden faces death penalty again on the state level after outrageous commutation. He killed children. And then you see another one down there, a serial killer, Jorge Torres, sentenced to several years for 2005 murder of 2 girls. These were child killers who were let out with pardons. And we need to know the consciousness of the president.
Well, yeah, and if this were something that Joe Biden ran on, then it might make sense with his political brand, but it really wasn't necessarily. You know, Trump was more of a criminal justice president during his first term than Biden was during his 4 years. And, you know, it's scary that with that absolute power, if someone is incapacitated, then that power can be corrupted. And that can put people at danger, obviously, if these people go out and reoffend. And the ability to change people's lives utterly deserves some accountability. So for everyone who's sitting on the bench during this discussion on the left, you're not going to have a say at the end of the Trump presidency in 2028 when you think that the very same scrutiny should be applied to him and his family and whoever else receives pardons and commutations. Either we fix the whole system and we have accountability for every president, or you can shut the hell up in 3 years when your panties are going to be in a bundle because you're going to be preemptively mad at whatever President Trump does at that time with the power that the left has deemed absolute.
And Kayleigh, beyond just the pardon power, I mean, there's questions for immigration. There's a senior Biden official who told Alex Thompson, hey, there was an immigration plan. Biden said shut down the border. Where did that plan go? What a troubling question. Where did it go and who got rid of that plan?
Well, and that's why the investigation into the Autopen is so important, because even if the commutations and the pardons are ultimately held up as legal, investigating the use of the Autopen is going to maybe get us some names of the officials in the White House who were actually making decisions on Biden's behalf. And that's so important even from a political perspective. I mean, as voters, we should be deeply concerned that there is a political party in the United States right now that has no problem at all with installing what was essentially a figurehead that it could control with its puppet strings. And this is a pattern of behavior for the Democratic Party. Think about the way that they treated Kamala Harris as well. They installed her as the backup candidate after Biden dropped out without a single Democratic primary voter weighing in on that decision. And does anyone actually think that Kamala Harris would have been making the decisions had she won in November? Of course not. She was yet another puppet. So even if you're a Democrat, you should be concerned at the direction that your party is taking. Do you really want to be a part of a party that's going to treat you like that as well?
Yeah. And how do we stop this from happening again? We want to know the person we elected is